to my review for Thor Love and Thunder. Just got back from the theater and I personally love the movie. Now, I've kind of noticed that the reception for this movie has been a bit mixed, kind of like Eternals, although I don't think it's as negative slash mixed as Eternals was. It seems like more people were kind of not feeling Eternals. At least seems like more people are more feeling Thor Love and Thunder, but it's definitely kind of mixed. Like Godzilla Mendoza, I recently saw his tweet not too long ago that he wasn't very high on the movie. Alex from High Top, he wasn't super big on the movie either. And kind of been more 50-50 on this movie compared to how everyone was in love with Ragnarok. But for me personally, I love the movie, and I would say I liked it slightly more than Ragnarok. Just a little bit more than Ragnarok, but yeah. Anyway, guys, let's jump in. So the movie is directed, of course, by Taika Waititi. It stars Chris Hemsworth, Natalie Portman, Christian Bale, Tessa Thompson, Russell Crowe, and the plot of the movie is Thor embarks on a journey like anything he's faced, a quest for inner peace. However, his retirement gets interrupted by Gorg the God Butcher, a galactic killer who seeks the extinction of the gods. Now, first thing we gotta talk about the cast. Chris Hemsworth is fucking phenomenal as always as Thor, and if you guys follow me on Twitter now as well as Instagram, I kind of mentioned this, where I went back and rewatched all three of the Thor movies before I went back and saw Love and Thunder, just because I was like, hey, fuck it, I haven't seen a lot of these movies in a long time. I haven't seen any of these since back in 2017 when I did my original review for Thor Ragnarok, so why not? And it was really cool and kind of interesting to see just how much more Chris Hemsworth has gotten comfortable in the role compared to how he was in the first Thor movie compared to how he is in Thor Love and Thunder. That's like the one thing I kind of like. I've noticed I love about the MCU in more of a retrospect sense is just seeing actors just get more comfortable and better in their roles as the films progress and as they've had more time in the roles and as the movies have progressed and everything. So yeah, Chris Hemsworth, he's great, man. He's phenomenal. Thor. Natalie Portman, phenomenal in this movie, man. I would definitely say this is her best performance in the MCU. She was fantastic, man. Christian Bale, ooh. Patrick Bateman himself, the goddamn Batman. My God, man, Christian Bale stole the show. Every time this man was on screen, man, he stole the show. Gorg the God Butcher is without a doubt top 5 best MCU villains. Easy, man. Easy. Right up there with fucking, Kingpin, and right up there with, Kingpin and, Loki. He's right up there, man. He was fucking phenomenal, man. I love Christian Bale as Gorg the God Butcher, man. He was so good, and Gorg the God Butcher, such a badass villain, man. He was incredible. Loved his design and everything. I know a lot of people were complaining that wasn't like the comics. They explained they didn't want the comparisons to Voldemort, which is fine. But me personally, I loved his design. I thought he looked so badass, man, and he was fantastic. Tessa Thompson is great as well as Valkyrie, man, as well as Russell Crowe and Taika Waititi. The cast itself, all across the board, was fantastic. Another thing, Taika's directing, once again, just like in Ragnarok, is on point in this film. It's bright, it's colorful. Like I mentioned before in my review for Wonder Woman 1984, this is the same thing. I noticed upon a rewatch of watching Thor Ragnarok. I might have even mentioned this in my original review back in 2017. The movie's beautiful. It looks incredible. It's like a Silver Age comic book come to life with how colorful it is, man. Seriously, Taika Waititi once again did a phenomenal job, man. He did a fantastic job to write the movie. The Guardians and the handful of times we see him at the start of the movie, I love their inclusion. I thought they were pretty fun as their interaction with Thor. We'll probably see a little bit more of this in Guardians 3 with Thor interacting with the Guardians, because I wouldn't be surprised if these movies kind of cross over each other and kind of overlap each other for a little bit, or we see Thor when he was still with the Guardians before they take off and do their own thing, which I'm assuming they take off and just do Guardians 3, and when the start of Guardians 3 will probably be them when they were still together before they run off. And I wouldn't be surprised if there ends up being some overlap between those two movies when Guardians 3 comes out. But love the Guardians and their inclusion. They were fantastic as always. Rocket's always fun to watch, man, as well as Star-Lord and the rest of the Guardians. Weirdly, Gamora was nowhere to be seen, which I'm weird because if I remember correctly, Gamora joined the Avengers, or not the Avengers, the Guardians at the end of Endgame. Yet she was nowhere to be seen. Unless she was somewhere in the distance that I just didn't catch. She was nowhere to see. There was Nebula, but no sign of Gamora, which I thought was a little strange, but I don't know. Maybe they'll explain that in Guardians 3 when that comes out. But that was fantastic, man. Another thing I gotta say that I really liked with this movie And this is something that you guys might know if you guys watched my review of Thor Ragnarok, which you probably, which I wouldn't be surprised you don't even remember saying this, because the audio quality of my videos back then were so shit. But my major problem that I had with Thor Ragnarok in my original review was that I thought because of how funny, because of how much comedy was in Thor Ragnarok, like if you guys remember in Thor Ragnarok, there were like 10 jokes a second. Where the more serious moments, whenever the movie tried to be a little bit more serious, they didn't really have much impact to them, and they just didn't really, have any real weight to them because of how comedic this movie was. I think Taika knew this when he was doing Love and Thunder, because the serious moments are definitely have way more weight to them in this movie compared to how they did in Ragnarok, and we'll talk more about this in the spoiler discussion, but that was really done. And also, I noticed the comedy was a lot more toned back compared to Ragnarok. There was nowhere near as many jokes in this movie as in Ragnarok. There was still tons of comedy, don't get me wrong, and once again, I thought it was personally hilarious, man. Taika Waititi knows his comedy, but I could definitely tell that there were nowhere near as many jokes in this movie as there were in Ragnarok. So that was something but like I said, we'll talk more about that stuff in the spoiler discussion. But I thought that was really good. The action scenes are fantastic, beautifully shot. Their choreography is really great, especially with Jane. I love what they did with Mighty Thor and how her movements, of course, using Mjolnir, with it breaking apart and being able to attack multiple enemies at once. But of course, the highlight of the movie for me, man, was the Shadow Realm. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in my reactions to the trailers, but when they go to the Shadow Realm and the movie just goes completely black and white for a bit, oh my god, it looks so beautiful, man. Oh my god, it was visually stunning. And I'm not saying this isn't me being a pretentious film student. I genuinely thought this looked amazing. I genuinely think black and white is a lost art. And when it was here, man, it was probably the best part of the entire movie, especially when you see it in IMAX, bro. Oh my goodness. That was the highlight of the movie for me, man. And when especially when the only bits of color you actually see is when they use the light from their weapons, like when Jane is using the light coming off of Mjolnir when the piece all together, or when Thor uses Stormbreaker, and then you get to see a little bit of color on their costumes, or when Valkyrie uses her lightning bolt, uses the lightning bolt, you kind of see a little bit of her color in the costume there. Oh my god, it was so good, man. Just that scene, that whole segment, and the action scene itself, man, where Gorg is going up against all three of these guys. Once again, it was phenomenally shot, beautifully choreographed, but yeah, it looked fucking stunning with the black and white, man. Like I said, this is me trying to be some pretentious film student. I genuinely thought it looked amazing, man. Black and white is a lost art, and Thor Love and Thunder proved that even more, man. Because goddamn it, that looked fucking beautiful, man, that whole scene. So that was another thing that I loved. There's a couple other things that I want to talk about, but once again, I'll have to save it for the spoiler discussion because I don't want to spoil you guys. Although I will say, for the comic fans out there that kind of already know about Jane Foster, Mighty Thor, and all that shit, if you were wondering if the Thing from the comics was either completely gutted out or just hidden from the trailers, it was hidden from the trailers. That's all I'm going to say, just to not spoil anyone that doesn't know about Jane Foster, her origins, and all that shit from the comics. Like I said, we'll talk more about that in the spoiler discussion. The music, once again, just like in Ragnarok, is fantastic, man. There's a bunch of banger tracks in here. We got AC/DC in here. There were probably other 80s rock bands that I probably missed, and I probably forget the names of, but yeah, the soundtrack, once again, just like Ragnarok, is fantastic. No, I don't think there was no immigrant song this time, but the songs we get instead are fantastic and bangers, man. They definitely got me hyped up for the action scenes, man. And yeah, and I would also recommend you guys do check this movie out on IMAX, because it looks really fucking good in IMAX, especially when we're, like I said, the Shadow Realm looked amazing. When we get to the world of the gods, where Zeus is and everything, that looked really great in the IMAX format. Speaking of that scene, hey yo, has the MPA gotten a little bit more lax with their PG-13 ratings? Because in both back-to-back MCU movies, we have had probably the goriest PG-13 movies we've seen ever. Because you guys remember in my review for Volky vs. Max, I mentioned how shocked I was at how much Sam Raimi got out of the PG-13 rating, because the movie is surprisingly gory and graphic. Low-key, I think Thor Love and Thunder might just be as gory. Maybe a little bit less, just because of how they managed to get away certain things to keep the PG-13 rating and not get slapped with an R rating. But the movie is shockingly graphic for a PG-13. I was like, God damn, this is graphic. I was like, hey yo, did Sam Raimi direct half of this? I was like, how are y'all getting away with this? But yeah, so shout out to Taika Waititi, man, for getting that much gore in the movie for the PG-13 rating. That was great. Now, In terms of flaws I would have with Thor: Love and Thunder, there's like really only two things I kind of have issues with. One, I do have to agree with Twitter. The scene that was in the trailers, I didn't get cut into the movie where Valkyrie's like licking her sword. Yeah, I gotta agree with Twitter. That's a crying shame that got cut. But the other thing is, I felt like this movie was a little bit too short. And the reason I say this is because this movie doesn't even clock in at 2 hours. And the reason I say it deals with Jane Foster and kind of what happened with her characterization and like I wish they kind of focused a little bit more on what's up with her, but like I said, I'll leave that more for a spoiler discussion. But that was something I kind of wish got a little bit more focus on just because of the comics. But besides that, man, I fucking love this movie. I was entertained from start to finish, man. I was loving it, man. Gorg the God Butcher is one of the best villains in the entire MCU. Taika Waititi once again proves why Black and White is a lost art with the Shadow Realm. Insert your Yu-Gi-Oh memes here. But yeah, man, my final verdict, of course, is a 10 out of fucking 10, ladies and gentlemen. Like I said before, I would say I would like this movie a little bit more than Thor Ragnarok, but they're definitely still very close in my books, man. Anyway, guys, this is where the spoiler-free discussion ends, and we're going to get into the spoiler discussion bit. So if you guys have not seen the movie, you don't want to get spoiled, leave now. For everyone else, let's jump right in. So, Jane Foster's canceled. Let's go into that. Now, this was something I was kind of wondering about, kind of worried, and kind of interested about what was happening, because you guys know in the trailers, there was never any mention of Jane having cancer. And you guys know, if you guys have read the comics, that the whole thing with Jane being Thor and everything, the major crux of that storyline was the fact that Jane was slowly dying from like stage 4 cancer. And that was kind of her whole thing where like when she is Thor, her cancer goes away and she's kind of like all healed up and everything. But of course when she doesn't have Mjolnir, she's like, you know, back to being cancer and all that shit. So I was curious if that was going to be still in the movie or that was completely gutted out. They do keep it, and I kind of liked how they kind of like transitioned from what was going on with Thor when Jane was getting her chemo done. I thought that transition was done really well. I also did like to see that Dorcia was back. I feel like I'm probably like the only person that loved Dorcia in Thor and Thor the Dark World, and it was actually happy to see her back in WandaVision. But it was cool that she got a little small cameo in the movie as well as the other guy. I believe his name was Eric, from the first 2 Thor movies as well, so it was cool to see those characters again. But Dorcia was a highlight for me personally, because I personally loved her in those movies, man. But yeah, it was cool to see them back, and it was cool that they actually did show off Jane having cancer and they didn't end up cutting that from the movie, because I was kind of worried, because I was kind of interested and worried, like, hey, are they actually going to cut out Jane having cancer completely from the movie or not? Because like I said, it was never mentioned once in the trailers. But yeah, they did it, and I think they did a good job with it. But I wish they did focus a little bit more of her cancer, because the movie really doesn't dedicate any real time to Jane's cancer at all. Like, we have obviously the scene where we see how she has, like, what we see in the beginning. There's like only like one scene where we see her really wrestling with that, but besides that, the cancer is not really mentioned outside when she eventually tells Thor that she has cancer, and of course the whole final scene there before he runs off to take on Gore before she comes in there at the last minute, because, you know, the Mjolnir is slowly killing her the more she uses it. But I kind of wish we just got more of Jane just wrestling with the fact she has cancer and the fact that she is somewhat kind of cured when she uses Mjolnir, which I'm pretty sure this is what the comic did a lot of. Like I said, I mentioned this, I'm pretty sure I mentioned this in my reaction to the trailer, but I have not read a single issue of Jason Aaron Thor, Mighty Thor. Haven't read any of that. I just know of it. But I do kind of wish we just got a little bit more of the movie where we really got to see Jane just wrestling with the fact she has cancer and all that shit. We only really get like one scene where that kind of happens when she's in the bathroom, but that's about it. I do wish we got a little bit more of that, and they just let Natalie Portman just go ham, man, because we all know how much of an amazing actress she is. So I kind of wish we just got a little bit more of that, and you know, Natalie Portman was just able to just go ham, man. But yeah, I wish they kind of expand more on her cancer and we got more time dedicated to it and just Jane, you know, wrestling with that and everything. But overall, I thought it was really good. And when we see Jane when she's like in her cancer form, if you want to call it that, the woman does straight up look like death, you know. But which actually funny but kind of sad and morbid story for you guys that happened after we left the movie. So we get out of the movie. I'm waiting outside by the bathrooms because, you know, my mom and everything is out there to get her my popcorn and my Thor cup, because, you know, they actually had like Thor Love and Thunder collector's cup thingy. So I always try to get those whenever I see them because I'm a collector. I like collecting shit like that for movies I care about. So, and the cup itself looks badass, man. But so we get it. So once she gets out of the theater, so once she gets out of the bathroom, I hand her my stuff, and right before I go in, and she asked me, "Did Dad tell you? Did Dad tell you? Tell me." And she said, "No. What happened?" And apparently, one of my dad's sisters actually like just passed away or whatever. I don't know if this like just happened when we left the theater, or if this might have been like from a couple days ago or whatever. But that's when I found out one of my dad's sisters had passed away. And then I go into the bathroom, whatever. We meet up with Dad and everything. We go out there. I'm a little bit ahead of my parents, my brother, looking for the car. And then, but I overhear that apparently the cause of death for her sister was cancer. And apparently she had been battling it for a few years now. Now, because I am a sick motherfucker with a dark sense of humor, I couldn't help but kind of laugh, like chuckle a little bit here and there, because given the movie we just got out of, I'm like, damn, this must have been one interesting viewing experience for my dad. Yeah, man, like I said, I am a sick motherfucker with a dark sense of humor, so I find shit like this funny. But yeah, that was something to as we walked back to the theater, as we walked back to the car with. But yeah. Anyway, let's move on to Gorg the God Butcher. First off, I love, and this is one thing I kind of noticed that this is kind of why I know that's one kind of had a film that Taika knew that he probably went too hard with the comedy in Ragnarok and kind of decided to dial that back and do and like kind of give the series a little bit more weight to them, because compare how Thor Ragnarok and Thor Love and Thunder open. Thor Ragnarok opens with Thor doing like, oh, hey, how did this happen? How did Thor end up here? You know, all that shit and the major bit of comedy we got there, of course, with Led Zeppelin playing and all that shit. When he meets up with that demon or whatever it's called, that's, you know, is the cause that causes Ragnarok on Asgard. And compare that to what happens in the Love and Thunder, where we see kind of get Gorg's origin story. We find out he had a daughter who, funny enough, is played by Chris Hemsworth's actual 10-year-old daughter. And then, of course, the end of the movie starts taking care of her as if he is her father, and she calls her Uncle Thor. So that's interesting. Yeah, we have now Chris Hemsworth, that we have Thor raising Gorg's daughter, who is played by Chris Hemsworth's actual daughter. Funny, and like I found this even more funny because in Thor: The Dark World, for you guys that don't know, in the post-credit scene of Thor: The Dark World, the post-credit when Thor and Jane finally meet back up and they have the kiss and everything. For you guys that don't know, apparently that was all done during reshoots, and they couldn't get Natalie Portman back for those scenes, so they basically gave Chris Hemsworth a pick of the litter of women he would like to kiss for that scene, and he ended up picking his wife. First off, smart man, but given what happened there, and of course that in Love and Thunder, I just couldn't help but laugh at that. I thought that was very funny. But anyway, as I was saying, for Gorg the God Butcher, I love, like, the movie starts off with him holding his daughter as they're like aimlessly treading through the desert, and eventually she dies. I'm assuming it's from heat stroke. But eventually she dies, and you see Gorg kind of like praying to his god, hoping that they would like save them or whatever. But eventually she ends up dying. He buries her and everything, and eventually he sees an oasis in the distance. Which at first I straight up thought it was a mirage. Like this was a mirage, and Gorg was gonna realize, oh shit, he's in a mirage and everything, and that might play tricks on him. But no, it's actually real. We see him once he gets in the oasis. He falls into the water, obviously drinking and everything, and then he rushes in to grab some fruit because I'm sure the dude was starving. And that's when he's meted with the god he worships. And Gorg realizes that the god he worships is a kind of an asshole, and he doesn't give a fuck about the people that worship him. And just seeing Gorg's face, this is once again why I was praising Christian Bale's performance so much in the beginning of the review, because Jesus Christ, he's so fucking good in the movie. And this scene was probably some of his best acting we've seen in the entire movie, as he slowly starts to realize that his gods don't give a shit about the people that worship them, and that's when he decides that he's gonna like fucking kill all the gods. When he slowly realized that, of course, grabs the blade and slays him. I was just like, oh my god, Christian Bale's performance in that entire scene there, where he's like meeting with the god that Gorg worships. My god, was incredible. Seriously, Christian Bale is a phenomenal actor, man. Jesus H. Christ. Ugh, man, I love Christian Bale. Man. He's so fucking good in this movie, man. And that's incredible. So we had that. One thing that also kind of surprised me is that Matt Damon was in the movie. Yeah, I did not know, even when I went back and rewatched Thor the Dark World, that the actor that the person that plays the actor Loki in the play that we see in no, that was Ragnarok, not Dark World. In Ragnarok was Matt Damon, and even when I after rewatched the movie yesterday, it still didn't cross my mind that that was Matt Damon. Even when I, of course, when I seen the new play that goes over Thor Ragnarok, what happens with Odin. Never once did that cross my mind, oh, hey, that's Matt Damon. It wasn't until once they were out, which also, that scene was hilarious, and Hella is played by, like, Jeanette McCurdy or whatever. I was dying throughout that whole scene. But it wasn't until afterwards, after Gorg, invades and attacks New Asgard and takes a bunch of the kids and everything with them, and then we see them without their makeup and prosthetics and everything, and we see it's just Matt Damon in glasses. I straight leaned up in my chair, being like, "Hey, yo, was that Matt Damon?" So yeah, Matt Damon has been in the MCU for a while. Didn't know that. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. Matt Damon was in the movie, but. Another scene, but this is another reason, now that we're in sports discussion, this is another scene that I loved about Gorg the God Butcher, and this is another reason why I loved him as a villain so much, and he's one of my top, and he's out like top 5 easily best MCU villains, is when he's terrorizing the kids, when he brings them into the shadow realm, where Idris Elba's character's kid, I'm slipping on the dude's name, is like telling him these stories of Thor, of him like vanquishing his enemies. I'm pretty sure he was telling the story of Ragnarok, of what happened in Thor Ragnarok, if I remember correctly. But eventually, as he's telling the story, Gore pops out of nowhere, grabs like this snake, and straight up like fucking breaks its neck and be like, "Oh, I thought you were having fun about this, amigo." And just like we see him throw the head to the kids, and they're all screaming as they're all trying to get away as it's hopping from each kid's lap. And Gorg's having the time. I'm like, bro, damn, bro, you out here terrorizing these kids. Man, I swear to God, man, Gorg, man. Like I said before, phenomenal villain, man. That scene was awesome. But yeah. Also, I forgot to mention this in my spoiler-free discussion. The scene from the trailers where you get to see Chris Hemsworth ass that was like pixelating the trailers. Yes, it is completely understandable in the movie. So rejoice, women and gay men. You get to see Chris Hemsworth's ass in full IMAX glory. 3D too, apparently, if you see it in IMAX 3D. So enjoy, I guess. Speaking of gay men, is Valkyrie a lesbian? Or is she like bi? Because she was talking, because we find out that Valkyrie actually had like a girlfriend at one point. I'm assuming that the other Valkyrie she was in love with was the Valkyrie that kind of like that kind of sacrificed herself for her in Thor Ragnarok, that took the blade when Hela threw it at her. I'm assuming that was her previous lover. And she kind of like goes and you actually have Korg going like, "Oh yeah, is that why you go down? Why you drink your sorrows away?" And he gives like this whole explanation. Man, I was dying throughout the entire thing. But yeah, scenes like that, and there were a couple other scenes throughout the movie where I'm like, "Hey, was Valkyrie like a lesbian in the MCU or in the Marvel comics or anything?" Don't know. Like I said, most of Thor's characters I'm completely unfamiliar with. I'm mostly a Spider-Man guy when it comes to my Marvel, knowledge and everything. But yeah, if any of you guys know for certain, leave that down below in the comments if it's been confirmed or anything. But yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting. I guess now we can talk about the post-credit scene, since we got a couple of them as always. So for the first post-credit scene, the mid-credit scene, we find out that eventually Zeus actually survived his attack when Thor threw the lightning bolt right fucking through him. I straight up thought the dude was dead. But no, it seems like Zeus managed to survive this, and then eventually, of course, enlists his help of his son, Hercules, to, of course, take down Thor. So obviously, this begs the question of what's going to happen if we're going to see this. If we're going to see this either A in Guardians 3, which we could maybe possibly see this because of Thor, and he's going to be in Guardians 3, and of course the Guardians were in Love and Thunder. There's a good chance we might see a little bit of this in Guardians 3, or are we going to see this maybe in Thor 5? Now, there hasn't been any confirmation for a Thor 5, but given the fact that Thor got a 4th movie in general, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up doing a 5th Thor movie with Hercules ended up being the main villain. Or they could end up doing this on something else completely entirely. Like I said, that we could end up seeing this in Guardians 3. But that actually got me interested to see how that's going to work and how Hercules is going to be eventually facing off Thor. And they did say Thor will return, so there's a good chance we might end up getting a 5th movie. That's when we see Thor go up against Hercules. So that would be interesting if we end up seeing it through that. And then for the actual post-credit scene, we find out Jane eventually dies. She eventually succumbs to the cancer, and she's, of course, brought to Valhalla. And then she's actually met with Idris Elba's character from, of course, the previous Thor movie, which was pretty cool to actually see how Idris Elba got a cameo, because I love this character from the previous Thor movie, so it's cool to see him here. And so he welcomes Jane into Valhalla and says, "Welcome to Valhalla." That was pretty cool. Although this does kind of contradict what the movie said earlier, because earlier in the movie, Thor met up with one of his, I guess, friends or whatever, someone else, and she was like, "No, leave me so I can enter Valhalla." And Thor says, "No, you have to die in battle in order to enter Valhalla. You survived the battle." So technically, Jane should have also not have entered Valhalla, because she technically survived the battle and died after it. She didn't die in the battle. So you could make the argument that the movie contradicts itself and how Jane ends up in Valhalla. But, you know, that was one thing I kind of know. It's like, hey, isn't this kind of contradictory? What happens at first? But hey, that seems pretty cool. Now, this chorus could beg the question if we're going to see Jane again in the MCU. Maybe they'll pull some bullshit and they'll find a way to bring Jane out of Valhalla and bring her back to life. Possibly, but I wouldn't be surprised if the last time we see Natalie Portman in the MCU, and I thought she was great as Jane. And like I said, like I said, when we see her in her cancer form, the woman looks like death. So that was pretty interesting, and see what that could lead for that. One running joke, I almost forgot to mention this, and this is probably will end the video off. One of the running jokes that I thought was hilarious was the fact that Stormbreaker has some issues. He's kind of jealous of Mjolnir because of course, with Mjolnir being back, and of course Thor trying to get back because it's his original hammer, Stormbreaker is kind of jealous of this fact. And that in the scenes where Stormbreaker just turns and looks at him, it's just it's like a jealous girlfriend, like being jealous of her boyfriend's ex. I just thought it was hilarious. And then of course they also get these two goats from when the world they're saving with the Guardians that are basically just a screaming goat meme. That I thought was pretty funny as well, man. But yes, but the one thing that's that thing kind of interesting, this is probably what the video off, is that Thor can still lift Mjolnir. He does indeed. We see him lift Mjolnir, no problem. Which I was kind of worried, interesting if they were going to keep that bit from the comics, because if you guys don't know, in the comics, this is also with Jane Foster's Thor run. Thor completely was unworthy of Mjolnir in the comics when Jane had Mjolnir. If I remember correctly, Nick Fury, I believe it was the white Nick Fury from 616 before he got replaced with Samuel Jackson Nick Fury later on in the comics, whispered something in Thor's ear which made him unworthy to hold Mjolnir, and that's of course how Jane got Mjolnir and she was Thor for a minute. Now, so I was kind of interested that they ended up not keeping that part in there, and Thor ended up having no issues still holding up Mjolnir and using it. I do question why he never did. I thought because, when he was doing Mjolnir and Stormbreaker and Endgame, that was one of the best parts of the movie. And I had a huge pop for that. So that would have been cool in Love and Thunder. We also got to see him deal with both Mjolnir and Stormbreaker. But alas, we did not get that. But it would have been cool, man. That would have been cool. But, yeah, man, I think it's everything I got to say about Thor: Love and Thunder, man. There might have been a couple things I might have missed, so if you guys also got anything else you want to add, leave it down below in the comments as always, man. And hope you guys enjoyed the video. But like if you did, subscribe if you're new. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter if you like it. Links to the description box below. And as always, come back for more. See you guys next time.